Good evening, members and officers of the Council and members of the press and public. I welcome you to this meeting of the Council. I would like to take this opportunity to invite all Thanet District Councillors and the officers for a Christmas drink and mince pies in the business suite after this meeting. I very much hope that you will be able to attend. Fire evacuation procedure. If the fire alarm is activated, please vacate the offices via the stairs, either through the security doors to my right or opposite the lifts in the foyer. Please do not use the lifts. Please assemble in Hawley Square on the green. Officers will assist you and advise when it is deemed safe to return to the chambers. Webcasting of proceedings. The proceeding of this meeting will be recorded and subsequently broadcast on the internet. I would advise that if filming takes place, anyone in attendance in the public areas may have their image captured. I urge anyone filming proceedings to avoid filming members of the public, particularly if there are children present. Does anyone intend filming the meeting? Right, okay. Any member of the public who objects to the possibility of being filmed may wish to take this opportunity to leave the meeting. Any filming or recording will not be permitted for any item of business where exempt or confidential information is considered following the exclusion of the press and public from the meeting. Would everyone present please ensure that their mobile phones are turned to silent and that they are not used to make or receive phone calls in the chamber whilst this meeting is in progress. Agenda item 1, apologies for absence. Apologies were received from Councillors Connor, Constantine, Ian Gregory and Glenn Coleman-Cook. Are there any other apologies? No. Councillor Roy Dexter. All right, Councillor Roy Dexter. Okay. Agenda item 2. Minutes of the previous meeting held on the 12th of October 2017. I move that the minutes of the meeting of the Council held on the 12th of October 2017 be approved and signed as a correct record. Would the Vice Chairman please second?
Seconded, Madam Chairman.
Do members agree? Thank you. Agenda item 3. A reminder to members. I felt that there was instances during the last meeting of Council when some members appeared to be having their own meeting. While I accept that it may be necessary at times to pass a word between colleagues, please can I remind members to demonstrate courtesy to other members by listening when they address the Council. The passing of Councillor Gregory. As members will already be aware, Councillor Ken Gregory has recently passed away. He was initially elected as a Dane Park Ward Councillor in 1995 and remained a district councillor for over 22 years. In addition to his district councillor duties, Councillor Gregory was also a parish councillor for Moncton Parish Council and a Kent County councillor representing the Birchington rural area. I am sure Council will join me in expressing sympathy to Councillor Gregory's family. Could all members please stand for a minute's silence as a mark of respect for the late Councillor Gregory. Thank you. Does any member wish to say a few words? Councillor Bayford.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I'm sure we're all shocked and saddened by the tragic and unexpected loss of Ken. I must say it still seems unreal to look to my right and see that he's not there. He was a larger-than-life character with a great sense of fun and humour. Talking to fellow members since his death, I was struck by how many of them remarked on the amount of time that Ken was prepared to spend with them, helping them on council issues, particularly in the area of planning, where his expertise was legendary. He was a powerful force in local politics for over 20 years. The knowledge and commitment he brought to Thanet Council will be sorely missed. He will be very difficult, no, impossible to replace.
Thank you, Councillor Bayford. Would anybody else like to say a few words? Councillor Dawson.
Thank you. I just echo what Bob Bayford has said. I also wanted to let people know that on the 18th of December there will be a celebration to Ken's life at Christie's Wine Bar in Birchington. So anyone that wants to come along, you're welcome. Whichever party you're from, it didn't matter. Okay, thank you. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Dawson. Councillor Crowe-Brown.
Yes, I would like to echo those sentiments. Ken Gregory, to me, was a great friend. I've never met somebody as highly motivated as him. His council work, his farm, latterly Kent County Council. He was an outstanding guy. And Councillor Bob Grover and I used to spend many a time in the pub with him. And he was a life and soul, as Councillor Bayford said, but he will be sorely missed.
Councillor Grove.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, as Councillor Crowe-Brown said, we did spend many a time in our local hostelry. He certainly was a man that knew his ales, and he was certainly a man, as Councillor Bayford said, knew his planning. And when he found out that I was becoming chairman of planning, he couldn't have been fairer, wiser, more helpful than any councillor I've ever known. He was certainly a good teacher to me, and he'll be sorely missed. Thank you.
Well, thank you all for those kind comments. Right, agenda item 4, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? Agenda item 5, petitions. 1 petition has been received and 2 petitions returned to council in accordance with Council Procedure Rule number 12. Please note that the Council's constitution permits up to 30 minutes for the consideration of petitions. Agenda item 5A, petition regarding Western Undercliff facilities. A paper petition containing 1,910 valid signatures and an e-petition containing 135 valid signatures has been received by the Council. I am pleased to welcome Ms Morgan to the meeting. Could you please make your way to the top table? Oh, sorry, right. Mrs Morgan, you have 5 minutes to speak.
Okay, we're going to talk about the history of the toilets. So we've always had public toilets in this area, but somewhere along the line the cafe took on the responsibility of these toilets. Once Southern Water took out the cafe, the toilets disappeared too. We suffered lots of disruption with the recreational grounds on the Royal Esplanade over the last couple of years, but to suffer a long-term disruption of the toilets seems a lot to bear. We don't feel that this is fair for the community to miss out on such an important facility. I'm very nervous. Who would use these toilets? The local community would benefit immensely from giving them reassurance that they can walk, drive, cycle, jog down to the beach and use the conveniences if necessary. Our beach is a really well-used beach all year round by dog walkers, fishermen, a number of sports groups, local schools, families, beachgoers, both local and day trippers. Having public toilets would make their visit far more pleasant and longer, as there's nothing worse than having to cut your journey short because of lack of facilities. Equality and inclusion. As it stands at the moment, the setup at the Western Undercliff excludes those that are elderly or disabled. And for families with small children, our beach has a gentle sloping bay with golden sands. It's especially ideal for families who wish to use this beach with their young children. But this lack of facilities is a hindrance. We feel that the convenience of the parking so near the sea with the Western Undercliff is ideal for families and the elderly, as they don't have to walk too far to get to the beach, but they're put off by not having their toilet facilities there. Disabled beachgoers and day trippers are completely deterred from visiting this area, as there simply isn't the facilities to support them. Restoring hygiene down at our beach. At present, some beachgoers and members of the public have been caught short. So they've been forced to urinate or worse down at the beach. This is unhygienic for the members of the public and socially unacceptable. Our nearest toilet is over not 6 miles away, it's not that far, 0.6 miles away. Sorry? It does seem it. At times it does. So it's up at the top of the West Cliff, behind the Lookout Cafe. It's not accessible for those with mobility issues due to the amount of steps between the beach and the toilets, and even for those without mobility issues, including myself, the logistics of having to pack up all your belongings and your children and hike up to the top of the cliff puts people off of visiting. Promotion of the beach. I know it's not our main sands, but we still need to promote it because it is a local beach. So having these toilet facilities at the Western Undercliff would increase visitors to the area. On TripAdvisor, the only thing that comes up as a negative is the lack of toilets. So it's important for the whole town. It's not just for the area. It's important for the whole town that our TripAdvisor is always on a positive. And the last thing is water. For a first aid situation, due to not having a lifeguard in this beach anymore, because it went off to Stone Bay because they've got beach huts, visitors need to administer first aid to injuries, just having some fresh water to clean out cuts and simple things like that. So therefore I'd like to present this petition to you today to show you the depth of the feeling amongst the local... I nearly done it, didn't I? I nearly done it. That's it. Thank you.
As the petition relates to an executive function, it will be referred to Cabinet without debate, in accordance with the Council's petition scheme. Agenda item 5B, Clean Up Cliftonville West petition. This item is to report back to the Council's response to the petition in accordance with the Council's petition scheme. Would members please note the report? Thank you. Agenda item 5C, Ramsgate Sprint Revival petition. This item is to report back the Council's response to the petition in accordance with the Council's petition scheme. Would members please note the report? Thank you. Agenda item 6, questions from the press and public. No questions have been received from the press or members of the public in accordance with Council Procedure Rule number 13. Agenda item 7, questions from members of the Council. 3 questions have been received from members. However, question 3, agenda item 7C, regarding council tax debt, has been withdrawn from the agenda at the request of the councillor who submitted it. Agenda item 7A, question number 1 from a member regarding council tax. I call upon Councillor Matterface.
Thank you, Chair. My question is to Councillor Townend. Can the Cabinet member explain the circumstances under which letters were sent to those claiming single-person discount on their council tax, where some who had lost a relative who had never lived at that address were told to prove they lived alone?
I call upon Councillor Townend to respond.
Thank you. As part of the review process to cross-reference various sources of information, such as the electoral roll registers, consumer and financial sector information, we used a credit reference agency, Call Credit. In some circumstances, customers who had power of attorney for family members were written to. The information received from Call Credit was cross-referenced with our records before sending letters, to ensure that we did not send any communication out where family members had passed away. In cases where the family member passed away out of the area, this would not have been held on our records, and in those cases, which were very few, a letter was sent to confirm. No discounts were removed prior to providing customers with the appropriate opportunity to advise of their current circumstances. The claiming of single-person discount represents a very significant reduction in the amount a customer is required to pay, and hence a significant reduction in the amount of income for the council. We want to ensure that every single occupier pays the correct amounts of council tax, but there are a significant number of customers who may forget to tell us about a change in their circumstances, which results in underpayments. All reasonable available tools are used to try and identify these cases to minimise income due. Data from sources such as the Credit Reference Agency are used in good faith, as there are not enough resources to undertake an individual detailed review in each case. This review has highlighted several cases where we have learned lessons. Every customer that contacted EKS has been given full feedback via a phone call, and charges have been implemented to future planned reviews as a result. Changes. You're not going to be charged for the new implementation. I would also like to apologise to those customers that were contacted and asked insensitive questions based on flawed information. It is worth noting that the review has identified significant numbers of customers who were no longer entitled to the discount and have now been rebilled for the full amount.
Councillor Matterface, do you have a supplementary question?
Thank you, Chair. I do, and thank you for that full explanation. So, as a third-party company was contracted to undertake this investigation, can you give me and everybody else here assurances that no data protection laws were breached when these people's bank accounts were accessed?
I would certainly hope that is correct, and I'm sure it must be.
Agenda item 7B. Question number 2 from a member regarding 19 Hawley Square, Margate. I call upon Councillor Johnson.
Thank you very much, Chairman. This is a question to Councillor Piper, Cabinet Member for Housing. Housing officers recently gave a very detailed and worrying report on homelessness and increasing waiting lists for social housing in Thanet. Could the Cabinet Member for Housing please confirm what efforts he has been able to make to bring 19 Hawley Square back into use for much-needed homes? Thank you.
I call upon Councillor Piper to respond.
Thank you, Chair. None.
Councillor Johnson, do you have a supplementary question?
I certainly do. Ward councillors, and particularly those of us in Margate Central, regularly see members of the public who are in dire need of housing, and it's an embarrassment for us to meet them in the gateway and look across the park to number 19 Hawley Square, which continues to be empty. Our administration put a new roof on it and made it comfortable and dry, but it was stuck in this whole theme of the connection with the Theatre Royal. and really goes back to the history of the old London Tavern. Unfortunately, I see no movement, unless the leader can tell us otherwise, or Councillor Piper, on the big announcement the leader made earlier in the year that Soho were taking over the Theatre Royal, and of course that the whole project would advance. It was news to us on the night, it was news to the public, and it was news in fact to Your Leisure, who've now had an extension to March for their arrangements with the council. So can we have the truth? Is Soho taking over, or are we left with still a big empty building when we're paying an outside company to house some of our most desperate people?
I call upon Councillor Reverend Piper to respond.
Thank you, Chair. I hope on this occasion that Councillor Johnson won't mind me mentioning a time when she was leader of this council. The council's cabinet considered the property at the meeting she chaired on the 20th of January in 2015 and agreed to dispose of 19 Hawley Square together with the Theatre Royal. It considered that linking the two buildings would provide the best opportunity to safeguard the future of the theatre. This arrangement creates a commercial opportunity to generate an income from 19 Hawley Square, which will help fund the future of the theatre. The council has now completed a marketing exercise for the disposal and selected a preferred bidder, which has previously been announced, as she mentions, by the leader in December 2016. Council have now agreed heads of terms subject to contract. An application for Heritage Lottery funding has been submitted and a stage 1 decision is expected soon. We will be in a position to announce the details early in the new year, and we are optimistic that this will ensure a long and successful future for this important local heritage asset. Members may recall the recent addition of an extra £2 million. The council has now committed a total of £30 million to the delivery of 150 new and refurbished affordable homes, and we are about halfway through completing this ambitious programme. And the programme includes empty buildings that have been returned to use in both Ramsgate and Margate. These new homes are desperately needed to help prevent and address homelessness, and we continue to look for opportunities to do more. Chair, may I also remind members that the Housing Department has been nominated for 2 prestigious awards for the excellent work that they have done, and we'll hear the results from the panel also in the new year. Congratulations, I believe, are due to them for their sterling efforts in this case. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Bayford.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I wonder if you'd indulge me just for a minute. I'd like to ask through you if Mr Howes could produce an idiot's guide as to what is and isn't acceptable in a question to this council. Councillor Savage and myself put questions in for this meeting tonight, and they were both rejected. One on the basis it was political, and one on the basis of, one I thought was okay because it referred to a motion that had already been agreed and passed and an action agreed. So could you please just produce something that's very simple and straightforward so that we've got a chance of getting them right in the future? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bayford. Yes, I thought we had explained to you why the questions weren't acceptable, but I'm more than happy to come back to you after the meeting and explain further.
With respect, that isn't what I asked. I asked if you could produce some sort of guide that gives us some guidance as to what can and can't be in it. I'm sure it's in the Constitution, but maybe we don't read it in the same way that you do. That's all.
Yes, I'm more than happy to provide clarity from the Constitution.
Agenda item 7C. As was stated before, this question has been withdrawn. Agenda item 8. Motions on notice. One motion on notice had been received. However, this motion has been withdrawn from the agenda at the request of the councillor who submitted it. Councillor Matterface will be considered at a future meeting of council in accordance with Council Procedure Rule 3. Agenda item 9, the Leader's Report. I call upon the Leader.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Compared to many of the meetings we have in our calendar, this one seems to have a fairly light agenda, and perhaps that is appropriate during this season of Advent. Advent is a season observed in the Christian calendar as a time of expectant waiting and preparation for the celebration of the birth of Jesus. Began this year on the Sunday the 3rd of December and finishes on Sunday the 24th of December, Christmas Eve, a day when I suspect many of us are more likely to be reading children and grandchildren Clement Clarke Moore's famous 1823 poem, The Night Before Christmas. It's naturally a time for reflection and perhaps healing after another difficult year. Indeed, there have not been many easy years in local government since the financial crisis of 2008. I would remind members of the starkest slide in budget briefings and discussions of the differences between the financial year 2012-13 and that coming in 2021. In 2012-13, this council enjoyed a revenue budget somewhere in the region of £21.5 million, of which around £11 million came to this council in government block grants and new homes bonus. By the financial year 2021, our predicted revenue budget will be around £16.5 million, all of which has to be raised locally because all government support will have ended at that time. Closing the budget gap, which has become a constant battle, and I know members are being briefed about difficult choices in the run-up to our budget meeting in February 2018. That work continues over the holiday period. Indeed, we do not usually get confirmation of government figures until the very beginning of the holiday season, and in recent years that final set of figures has always contained a couple of unwarranted, unwelcome surprises. Let's hope this year, already difficult enough, will at least spare us that. I could at this point probably nominate various decision makers in traditional Christmas roles. The Grinch maybe, or Scrooge may seem particularly appropriate, but in a very real sense that is against the spirit of the Advent season, or even perhaps the previously rather oddly entitled pagan festival of Saturnalia, which predates it. Both are about hope and a vision of light during the darkest nights of the winter. Perhaps I can suggest the greatest light we have as a council is to be found amongst our hard-working staff, who in a troublesome financial and budgetary climate continue to work hard to provide the very best services they can in the best traditions of public service. On your behalf, I want to use the bonhomie of this time of year to publicly thank them all, and perhaps we could express our thanks with a round of applause, which could metaphorically at least be heard all over the building. Stunning examples include the Environmental Action Team working in Cliftonville, who in 8 hectic weeks recently collected 32 additional tonnes of waste, including wood, rubble, soil and bagged waste, litter picked 59 streets, shifted 19 abandoned or nuisance vehicles, put in new yellow line marking and enforcement in Gordon Road, undertook 18 mixed bulky waste tip moves, moved 35 mattresses, 15 settees, 12 old push bikes and numerous fridges. And in trying to prevent its return, issued in excess of 800 warning letters via the private sector housing licensing team. Not bad for 8 weeks, I think you would agree. It's on the back of such sterling efforts that the independent chair of the Improvement Board gave us a glowing recommendation for the work undertaken in overcoming the infamous peer review of 2014. That is particularly strongly reflected in the nomination and success of various parts of our council for awards. We've already heard tonight about the Housing and Finance Institute prestigious National Housing Business Ready status. Richard Hopkins was awarded the Kent Housing Professional of the Year 2016 by the Kent Housing Group. East Kent Services won the Behaviour Change at the MJ Achievement Awards 2017. Visit Thanet have been prolific award winners. Tourist Information Professional of the Year in 15-16, Tourist Information Professional of the Year in 15-16 silver and gold. Bronze Award Tourism and Hospitality for the website in 16-17, first in the South East and fourth in England for social media activity. Margate Task Force has similarly been a prolific award winner. Winner of the DUP Game Changers Award 15-16, finalist in Kent Housing Excellence Awards 2016, runner-up in the Chief Constable's Award for Community Policing in 2017, and acute service line winner at the Kent and Medway NHS Social Care Partnership Trust Awards 2017. I also want to acknowledge all of the hard work undertaken by councillors as well, particularly the casework, often hidden away from view, but which can make a real difference to residents' lives. And on behalf of all of those residents, I would like to thank you for all of the many hours over and above the call of duty many of you I know put in to do that casework. And I suspect that casework is set to increase in the new year. We've all, I think, probably heard something of the difficulties of the new universal credit system, And even this evening we've had some discussion of and previous briefings on the growing issue of homelessness. These are common problems for all local authorities, but clearly bite harder in areas of lower income and deprivation. However, again, as we've already heard pass through in answer to a question this evening, our hard-working housing team do everything they can to alleviate the problems, and of course it's great to know that they have been nominated, or shortlisted rather, for not one but 2 LGC awards, the announcement of which will take place in March 2018. So to return to where I began, as politicians we are recognised as tools of our trade some of the more well-known lines about Christmas. In the beginning was the Word is that famous Christmas reading from St John's Gospel, and some of our residents may yet be thankful for a silent night, at least from us. It is perhaps a good moment to remember that our roots here in this country come from Judeo-Christian culture, and our moral behaviour is as common with all the main religions of the world, or should be. It's a family time more than any other part of the year, and I trust that you will all find that time both restful and enjoyable. So in those famous words, not perhaps the ones expected of bar humbug, can I wish you rather a Merry Christmas to you all, and to all a good night.
I call upon Councillor Bayford to comment on or ask questions in relation to the Leader's report.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, for a change, a lot of good stuff in there tonight, Leader. I think that your comments on the environmental action in Cliftonville are well merited. It is really a superb result. But one of the things I'm really glad about is that in the process we've issued 800 warning notices. We often forget that it's people that create litter and mess. Now, councils get the blame for the streets being messy, but it's people that do it. I think we need more penalties, more enforcement, but I certainly also think we need more education. I'm also a little bit concerned that some of the resource that may be being poured into Cliftonville means that other areas are not getting the service that they need. I've had a number of complaints about the state of the streets in Broadstairs, and one of the facts is that the season in Broadstairs is getting much longer, but we have a seasonal collection or bin emptying schedule that changes when it's deemed to be winter. That means fewer bin collections, fewer emptyings and so on. And the litter problem has been really quite serious. Having said that, I do think that we ought to be thinking as a council about things that we can do to prevent this problem, because what strikes me as odd is that you'll see somebody approach a bin, it's clearly already full, and they very carefully and neatly put their rubbish down by the side of it, only for the wind and the seagulls to move it around. And I'm sure that if they only thought, they might find the next bin might be less full, or they might even take it home. And I notice there's a sign on the Thanet Way saying, take your litter home. Many do. So I do really think that we ought to be looking at things like that. And perhaps we need a dialogue with some of the outlets in our towns, because an awful lot of the rubbish that's around relates to sort of rubbish that comes from takeaway food places and stuff like that. So I think we ought to be looking at that. I also endorse your praise for our staff. The list of awards and achievement really is impressive, and it does seem as though we punch well above our weight in terms of excellence. I also echo your recognition of the hard work of TDC's councillors. They certainly receive plenty of brickbats, and certainly more brickbats than bouquets, and they certainly don't do it for the money. I think looking forward, 2018 is going to be an important and potentially difficult year for TDC. Council is currently reorganising and will probably have to keep on doing so, not only to help meet budget constraints, but also to deliver services in a much more innovative way. And we've heard the increased pressures that are going to come on this council, and so the job's going to get harder. I think it's also true that the headline event of the coming year is the public inquiry into the local plan. And we're all aware that there's still a potential sticking point here in the shape of Manston. I would urge you, Leader, to consider all options. Up to now, you've spent a lot of time talking about the problems if we don't approve the plan in its current form and frightening us with the potential housing numbers. But there are alternatives, and I think we should be looking at them. There's certainly precedence for having a twin-track approach, which would allow for 2 potential outcomes for the Manston site, whilst the rest of the plan could be agreed. This would have the dual benefit of allowing the progress of the plan to stay on target and also remove the need to completely rewrite the plan in the event of a DCO being granted. You had lots of references to the Bible in your speech. I come from a different place, so when I looked up things to talk about as regards Christmas, I came up with the quote from Bart Simpson, and he urged people to remember the true meaning of Christmas, the birth of Santa. And Bernard Manning, who said that at Christmas he used to give his kids packs of batteries with a note saying, "Toys not included." Chairman, members of the public, residents of Thanet, have a Merry Christmas and a peaceful and Happy New Year. Thank you.
I call upon the leader to respond. I call upon Councillor Matterface to comment on or ask questions in relation to the leader's report.
Thank you. Could I ask, did you really say DUP or did you actually mean DWP in your speech? I would just like... £2 billion. Thank you for your good wishes, and obviously we share those. But could I remind you, at the last full council meeting, you told me where there was no truth in what I said about A&E at QEQM being under threat. I also have to ask at this point, when will the Cabinet Advisory Group on QEQM meet again? Because I can't even remember the last time we met. We've only met twice. But in the light of the publicity currently being given to the various options relating to our NHS in East Kent, surely we need a stronger position that is for the benefit of our residents who are most likely to have difficulty to get to Canterbury or Ashford in light of the apparent ignoring now of the so-called golden hour. However, a little bit of optimism has come in today. Paul Carter at KCC, apparently during the debate, in answer to a question from Councillor Constantine, who was allowed to put a question through somebody else because she's ill in bed, Paul Carter said he favoured a third option, not option 1 or option 2. So from our point of view, I think any alternative option to just the 1 and 2 that were on the table can only be a good addition to the debate. Thank you.
I call upon the leader to respond.
Well, of course, that entirely depends what the third option is. In the Council of Governors informal meetings that followed the meeting at County Hall, I did suggest that option 3 was missing, because option 3 would seem to me to be possibly look at where the housing that you might get is most valuable, and I suspect that might be Canterbury, and invest that money in the other 2. We'll see.
I call upon Councillor Grove to comment on or ask questions in relation to the leader's report.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, listening to both sides there, Councillor Bayford and Councillor Wells, they're very interesting. Some of the things I do agree with Councillor Bayford, especially on the litter side. We have a big problem with that in the countryside, as you all well know. But as far as the report is concerned, and I'm concerned, I think it was like a Christmas card. When Councillor Wells opened it, it was full of happiness and glitter, wasn't it? And I think that's the way this council should go. And let's hope next year that we can have a good cross-party working party and really get Thanet on the right route and going. And I wish you, take this opportunity to wish you and the officers and the public a Merry Christmas. Thank you.
Call upon the leader to respond. No. Agenda item 10, report of the chairman of the Overview and Scrutiny panel. I call upon Councillor David Saunders to present his report.
Thank you, Chairman. Members, the report before you this evening outlines both the Overview and Scrutiny panel and subgroup meetings since we last met in October. As you will see, the Corporate Performance Review Working Party met on the 13th of November, and I would confirm that the Community Safety Partnership Working Party is scheduled to meet on the 20th of February 2018, next year, believe it or not. Doesn't time fly? In addition, and as I previously advised, 3 draft plan working group meetings were held in advance of the scrutiny meeting, which was held on the 21st of November, at which panel members tabled a number of points of concern for consideration. Members, in view of a number of inquiries and comments I've received in respect of the subsequent scrutiny meeting, I feel obliged to elaborate on the report within the papers before you this evening. The report ends with what is constitutionally correct by saying there were no recommendations submitted to Cabinet in the period under review. But I would particularly like to elaborate on the outcome of the meeting on the 21st of November. For those who weren't there, on page 31 of the report that the scrutiny panel had before them on the evening, 3 alternative options were outlined for consideration, with option 1 being recommended for adoption. Although panel members raised points of concern at the scrutiny meeting, no formal proposals or amendments were tabled from the floor, and therefore the chairman was duly bound to propose the recommendation, which was seconded, and as the published minutes will show, and they are now on public availability, when put to the vote, panel members declined to endorse the recommendation on a margin of 9-1. I trust that this now satisfactorily explains the current position, and members, I would thank you for your patience. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Saunders. Agenda item 11, flexible use of capital receipts, updated strategy 2017 to 18. I would advise that in accordance with Council Procedure Rule 17.6, I will call for a recorded vote on the motion or any amendments and substantive motions. I call upon Councillor Townend.
Thank you, Chair. This report sets out a proposal to apply to the Department for Communities and Local Government to use some capital receipts for the purposes of funding transformative projects. This proposal requires the approval of Council and DCLG because of a requirement under government regulations issued in 2016. The 2 specific projects named in 2017-18 are the corporate restructuring and digital transformation, both of which have one-off costs to be funded from receipts, but which have ongoing annual savings. This will help enable the Council to deliver its medium-term financial strategy. I move the recommendation.
Is there a seconder? Councillor Bayford. Right. I instruct the monitoring officer to conduct the recorded vote.
Oh, sorry.
Hmm? Oh, yeah. Councillor Fenner? Sorry.
I was just wondering if there was going to be a debate.
It can be debated.
You can speak if you feel you need to.
Yes, please. Yes, indeed, I have some concerns about this use of asset disposal. For me, it should be used for capital projects, such as buying and doing up empty properties to try and ease the homelessness crisis. Instead of that, central government is forcing local councils to sell their assets to counteract the consequences of a reduction in government funding in the name of austerity. This dogma is hurting the delivery of public services, and what is perverse about it is the fact that in spite of years of austerity, the national debt is going up to 90% of GDP. Why? Because austerity is damaging the social fabric, and it is causing even more problems than it is supposed to solve. At our local level, we are in a situation where we have to restructure to create efficiency savings by cutting out totally some services. But this will inevitably cause problems elsewhere, which at some point will have to be addressed and funded. Regrettably, I think that this council is caught in a downward spiral which is not of its own doing, but of central governments. I have some questions about this. What happens if the assets do not sell, or if they do not provide the necessary amounts that are needed for the extra funding? And what will this process do? Is it not going to set up a dangerous precedent to have this flexible use of asset disposal again in future years? I do think that it is important for this council to address these points. Thank you.
Councillor Townend, would you like to respond?
Yes. As far as the assets we're talking about, those have already been sold. That's the first thing. And I'm told that we do not need to reply to a political speech.
Councillor Wells, would you like to?
Yeah, I mean, only to say very simply and straightforwardly, terrific speech, lovely points, great deal of sympathy in many ways. Sadly, by law, we have to produce a balanced budget. And as part of that, as I outlined in the Leaders' Report earlier, in the non-jolly bit, we are looking at a massive reduction in revenue for this council at the same time as people expecting the services to improve and improve and improve. And at some stage, we have to take steps that are difficult and uncomfortable in order to actually make that budget balance. That is the law. That is what we have to do.
Thank you, everybody. I will instruct the monitoring officer to conduct the recorded vote.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Ashby. Councillor Bainbridge. Councillor Bayford. Councillor Braidwood. Councillor Brim. Councillor Buckley. Councillor Campbell. Councillor Keith Coleman-Cook. Councillor Crowe-Brown. Councillor Curran. Councillor Dawson. Councillor Day. Councillor Della. Councillor Dennis. Councillor Dixon. Councillor Edwards. Councillor Evans. Councillor Jeremy Fairbrass. Councillor Lynn Fairbrass. Councillor Falcon.
Agree.
Councillor Fenner. Councillor Game. Councillor Grove.
Agree.
Councillor Hillman.
Agree.
Councillor Howes.
Abstain.
Councillor J. Jones.
Agree.
Councillor Johnston. Councillor Larkins. Councillor Martin. Councillor Matterface. Councillor Parsons. Councillor Partington. Councillor Linda Piper. Councillor Reverend Stuart Piper. Councillor Linda Potts. Councillor Roy Potts. Councillor Rogers. Councillor Rozecki. Councillor David Saunders. Councillor Maeve Saunders. Councillor Savage. Councillor Shonk. Councillor Stummer-Smirchsing. Councillor Taylor. Councillor Taylor-Smith. Councillor Tomlinson. Councillor Townend. Councillor Venables. Councillor Wells.
That is passed then. Agenda item 12, 2018 to 19 fees and charges. Would members please refer to the supplementary agenda number 1? I would advise that in accordance with Council Procedure Rule 17.6, I will call for a recorded vote on the motion or any amendments and substantive motions. I call upon Councillor Townend.
Thank you, Chair. This report sets out the recommendations of Cabinet on the 30th of November, following overview and scrutiny panel on the 21st of November. Cabinet decided to recommend to Council the cancellation of the increases for bulky waste. We also recommended the removal of the cremation charges for unviable babies. Going beyond the overview and scrutiny recommendation, Cabinet also proposes the removal of the charge for stillborn babies and those under 1 month old. This estimated loss of income resulting from the removal of these charges is insignificant in the context of the overall income generated from the proposed increases. I would like to draw members' attention to a typographical error that has been brought to my attention. In the supplementary agenda, page 816, the heading Disposal of Created Remains should obviously read Disposal of Cremated Remains. Albion Road car park at Birchington has for the past 2 years been subsidised by Birchington Parish Council to enable the first 30 minutes of parking to be pegged at 20p. The proposed full charge from April is £1 per hour. The Council has had constructive discussions with Birchington Parish Council regarding their subsidy on this arrangement and whether or not they wish to continue with it. We have reached a 2-year agreement for the subsidy to continue at £2,500 for 2018-19 and £3,000 for 2019-20. The Royal Harbour car park, Ramsgate, has for the past 2 years been subsidised by Ramsgate Town Council to enable free Saturday parking. This arrangement was an alternative to the Council's original intention, which was to make Cannon Road the Ramsgate car park that offered free Saturday parking. Ramsgate Town Council has today engaged with Council to discuss their updated subsidy. Therefore, I propose that the Saturday charge in respect of the Royal Harbour and Cannon Road car parks are not approved by Council tonight. Approval of these charges can be considered by Cabinet in January for final Council approval in February. I therefore propose to Council that there is an amendment to the recommendation to be. It is recommended that Council consider and approve the fees and charges as listed in Annex 1, with the exception of the parking charges in respect to the Royal Harbour and Cannon Road car parks, Ramsgate.
Is there a seconder? Councillor Wells. Anyone wish to debate? No. I instruct the monitoring officer to conduct the... Councillor Matterface, sorry.
That's all right. I just wanted to highlight the costs of replacement bins. I know in the scheme of things it's a small part of these fees and charges, but in many cases the damage to an existing black bin, red bag, food caddy, etc. is not necessarily down to the householder. My red bag went AWOL, it had my address on it, it just disappeared. I would have certainly been a little bit aggrieved having to pay £8 to get a replacement. Is there any scope with these charges that somebody who maybe has moved into a property and the bin has gone with the previous owner, and any kind of leeway in that? But also, if your brown food caddy has been damaged by the bin men hurling it down the driveway, as I have actually seen, it seems grossly unfair that the householder has to pay for the replacement. Or the wheelie bin that got left so close to the curb edge that a lorry coming along drove straight over it. I've also seen that. It just strikes me as being slightly unfair to charge some of the people who are among the poorest in our in our community these, what I consider quite excessive charges. So I would just like to ask if there's any leeway in that particular part of these fees and charges. Thank you.
I call upon Councillor Townend.
Excuse me. We haven't actually increased those charges. They remain the same.
Councillor Johnson.
Thank you very much, Chairman. We'd be failing in our duty if we didn't come here and report back to you what members of the public say to us, whether it's on parking, whether it's on replacement bins, or, as Councillor Matterface has now said, about the red bags. The red bags, we weren't being charged for them, but it looks as if we will now be charged for them. And so the particular issue that, the particular issue that's been raised by residents with me, if you buy a property, and we're very lucky that so many people wish to buy properties here, they move into the new property and they find they haven't got the bin. The previous owner has either taken the bin or it's been damaged, it's disappeared. And I've had to ask officers if we could have bin replacements for people, and the answer is they can have one if they pay for them, etc., etc. Some of the bins have actually been damaged by, I'm afraid, staff working for us, and people have told me this. So that's one issue. The other one is about the car parking charges, and I know the reasons why we have to increase, etc., etc., but we have a particular complaint coming from residents in the ward where people need to park in Dreamland because they can't park on the roads. They're just absolutely packed already. People are asking for permits, and I've had no answers to emails now for nearly a month on questions to do with permits. But the Dreamland charge is at £12 for the 5 hours plus, is a lot more expensive than the £7.50 that you'll pay when you go into the Arlington car park. So we're shooting ourselves in the foot. People will go to the cheapest one first. Particularly, I'm getting complaints for people who are service providers, as in hairdresser along Eaton Road constantly contacts me and officers to say it's a very expensive haircut for his customers. We really need to look at the whole picture and the impact we're actually having, and I would really appreciate replies to my emails from officers when I'm representing my constituents. Thank you.
I instruct the monitoring officer to conduct the recorded vote.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Ashby. Councillor Bainbridge. Councillor Bayford. Councillor Braidwood. Councillor Brim. Councillor Buckley. Councillor Campbell. Councillor Keith Coleman Cook. Councillor Crowe-Brown. Councillor Curran. Councillor Dawson. Councillor Day. Councillor Della. Councillor Dennis. Councillor Dixon. Councillor Edwards. Councillor Evans. Councillor Jeremy Fairbrass. Councillor Lynn Fairbrass. Councillor Falcon. Councillor Fenner. Councillor Game. Councillor Grove. Councillor Hillman. Councillor Howes. Councillor J. Jones. Councillor Johnston. Councillor Larkins. Councillor Martin. Councillor Matterface. Councillor Parsons. Councillor Partington. Councillor Linda Piper. Councillor Reverend Stuart Piper. Councillor Linda Potts. Councillor Roy Potts. Councillor Rogers. Councillor Rizecki. Councillor David Saunders. Councillor Maeve Saunders. Councillor Savage. Councillor Shonk. Councillor Stummer-Smirchsing. Councillor Taylor. Councillor Taylor-Smith. Councillor Tomlinson. Councillor Townend. Councillor Venables. Councillor Wells.
That's agreed. Thank you. Agenda item 13, representation on outside bodies. Would members please refer to supplementary agenda number 1? I call upon Councillor Wells.
Thank you, Chairman. We have as yet, as part of conversations with other group leaders, found anybody who is willing to volunteer for the 2 vacancies we're particularly looking at, and they are about action for rural communities and about parking representation. I think that's a fair description. Councillor Bayford and I will continue to ask for volunteers, but if anybody has a stunning wish to be involved in those particular activities, would they please let us know?
Thank you. Agenda item 14, changes to committees, panels and boards 2017-18. Would members please refer to supplementary agenda number 1? Proportionality. As described within the report, consensus on the options has been achieved between group leaders. So, unless any member wishes to propose an alternative option, I propose option 1 as shown in the supplementary agenda. Would the Vice Chairman please second?
Seconded, Madam Chairman.
Do members agree? Thank you. Nomination of members to serve on committees. Group leaders may wish to take this opportunity to advise of any change to their nominations to committees, panels and board for the remainder of 2017-18. I call upon Councillor Bayford.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'd like to take Councillor Taylor-Smith off of Governance and Audit and Councillor Savage off of Licensing, and additionally Councillor Bambridge off of Planning, and to put Councillor Taylor-Smith onto Planning. Thank you.
Does any other group leader wish to make any amendments to their committee nominations? Right, thank you. Agenda item 15, Dreamland and Cinema Margate, funding of Disability Discrimination Act, compliantly. The purpose of this item is only to inform Council that this individual Cabinet member decision was treated as urgent in accordance with paragraph 4 of the Budget and Policy Framework Procedure Rules and was exempt from call-in in accordance with the Overview and Scrutiny Procedure Rules, whilst members can debate the decision making process. The substantive decision cannot be debated. Would members please note the report? Thank you. Oh, that's it. That concludes the business for this meeting of Council.